I never thought I'd be the type of guy to cry at a funeral. Honestly, I didn't even know what to feel when my mom passed. I mean, we weren't exactly close, at least, not in the way most people think of mother-son relationships. She was loving in her own way, but also strict, maybe even cold at times. She had standards, expectations, the kind that made me feel like I could never really measure up. And yet, losing her hit differently than I expected. The funeral was small, mostly family, a few friends who had stuck around from back when my mom actually socialized. I had tried to avoid a lot of eye contact because, well, my uncle. God, my uncle. I should probably explain. My mom's brother, Greg, had always been a thorn in my side. He made a career out of making me feel inadequate. I'm not exaggerating. Every family gathering, every birthday, every damn holiday, it always came back to me being lazy, irresponsible, or not living up to my potential. Even my mom sometimes said it in ways that made me shrink inside, but nothing like my uncle. That day, standing near the casket, I was trying to keep it together. I'd barely slept, my chest felt like it had been packed with concrete, and yet the thought of seeing Greg in his pinstripe suit made me want to puke. I kept my eyes on the floor, watching the people shuffle past, waiting to sign the guest book or say their last words. And then I heard it. Always was a disappointment, wasn't he? I froze. I recognized the voice instantly. Greg had leaned down, almost whispering into my ear, his breath warm and sour from God knows what. I could feel his smirk, even though I couldn't see it from the angle. For a second, I wanted to lash out, to shove him or yell at him for saying that at a moment like this. But instead, I just nodded. I know, right? That's probably not the heroic response people imagine. But I didn't have it in me to argue. Not here, not now. There was something quietly satisfying in letting him think he'd won, in letting him believe he still had the power to wound me. I clenched my jaw and kept walking, ignoring the jab of anger that tried to rise in my throat. I was tired. So tired. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. People spoke, shared memories of my mom that made me laugh through tears. The preacher said some stuff that made me question the meaning of life and the permanence of death in the same breath. And through it all, Greg hovered, always lurking at the edge, always ready to remind me of my place. At one point, he grabbed my shoulder comfortingly and said, "You know she always expected more." I stared at him for a beat, then forced a tight smile, muttered a quiet, "Thanks," and pulled my hand away. The drive home afterward was quiet. My car smelled like flowers and expensive cologne from the funeral home. I kept replaying every word Greg had said, every look my mom had given me over the years, trying to reconcile the mother I loved with the mother who sometimes disappointed me with her high standards. It was a strange mix of grief, relief, and anger that I couldn't untangle. When I got home, the house felt empty in ways I hadn't realized it could. My mom had lived there for decades, and now it was just me in her living room, the silence pressing down. I wandered through the rooms almost on autopilot, touching things she had touched, seeing little remnants of her everywhere. A scarf draped over the couch, a half-finished puzzle on the coffee table, the faint scent of her perfume lingering like a ghost. I wanted to cry, to scream, to just let all the tension from the last few years out, but I just sat on her recliner and let the quiet take me. It was late, past midnight, when I finally got a text from my dad's side of the family checking in. "You okay?" it read. I typed back something noncommittal. Truthfully, I didn't know if I was okay. I had this gnawing sense that my uncle's words weren't just cruel, they were revealing. They were a reminder that, in some twisted way, my mom had always been my protector, even if I didn't realize it. Maybe she'd known that one day, when it mattered most, I'd need someone on my side. And I guess that's why, when I saw Greg storm out of the funeral later that week over some petty inheritance squabble before the will was even read, I felt something stir inside me. A quiet, vindicated heat that whispered, "She's got me." She always had. I still had no idea what the will would say. I didn't think about it much at first. I didn't need her stuff to feel close to her. But there was this subtle, underlying tension, Greg's eyes constantly flicking to me when he thought I wasn't looking. That reminded me that whatever came next, it would be a test. Not just of what she left behind, but of who I was. I didn't know the stakes yet. I just knew one thing. For the first time in my life, I felt the weight of my mom's protection, even if she wasn't there to deliver it herself. And somehow, that made me feel stronger. The week after the funeral was surreal. It felt like everyone was tiptoeing around, like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for the will to be read. I hadn't heard anything from Greg, but I could feel his eyes on me every time I went out, at the grocery store, at the gas station, even when I stopped by my mom's favorite diner to grab a coffee. The thing about him is, he's subtle, not in a kind, mysterious way, more like a predator sizing up its prey. You feel it, even when you try to ignore it. I mostly kept to myself, stayed in the apartment I'd moved into after college. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom in a quiet part of town, but it was mine. And right now, mine felt like a safe word. I didn't answer a lot of calls, didn't post anything on social media. I needed space to process, to feel. I don't know anything, without everyone around me projecting their grief or their judgment onto me. One evening, my phone rang. It was Greg. I debated ignoring it. I really did. But I picked up. "Hey," he said, trying to sound casual. "You doing okay?" I could hear the smirk in his voice. I almost laughed. "I'm surviving," I said flatly. There was a pause. Then, "Listen, your mom. She wanted the best for you." I scoffed quietly. "Yeah, I know." "No, seriously," he pressed. "She worried about you a lot. You've always been a disappointment, man. But she still." I cut him off, my voice calm, but ice underneath. "Thanks for the reminder. Really. Appreciate it." And I hung up. I know it sounds petty, but that call lit a fire in me. I didn't want to be angry at him. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction, but it made me realize just how much he expected to have power over me. My mom's death was supposed to cement his position in the family hierarchy, and for some reason, I wasn't giving it to him. That thought alone gave me this strange sense of control. The day of the will reading came faster than I expected. The family lawyer had arranged for a small gathering in my mom's living room, which now felt impossibly empty without her. Greg arrived first, of course, dressed like he was about to give a PowerPoint presentation. He was calm, but there was a tension in his shoulders, a slight twitch in his jaw that told me he knew something wasn't as guaranteed as he thought. The lawyer arrived, carrying a thick envelope, and everyone sat around the living room. It was quiet, too quiet. Even the dogs, her old golden retriever and the small terrier she'd rescued a few years ago, sensed the tension. I sat across from Greg, who kept his gaze fixed on me, like he was willing me to crack first. "Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that your mother had very specific wishes," the lawyer said. "She prepared this will to make sure her assets were distributed according to her intentions." Greg smirked slightly, and I felt my stomach tighten. I had been bracing for some kind of fight, some verbal onslaught. But my mom had planned this, hadn't she? She'd known him too well. The lawyer opened the envelope. I held my breath. Every eye in the room was on me, but I barely looked at anyone. I could hear Greg shifting, hear the small creak of the recliner as he leaned forward, probably confident he knew how this would go. The entirety of her estate, her house, her savings, personal belongings, and family heirlooms are to be left to her son, my name. For a moment, no one moved. My brain struggled to process. Did I hear that right? The house, the savings, everything. I glanced at Greg, and his smirk was gone. His jaw had tightened, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Everything," he finally managed, his voice rough. She can't have meant." "I'm afraid she did." The lawyer interrupted, calm and unflinching. "These are her legally binding wishes." Greg stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. "This is insane. I deserve." "No, you don't," I said quietly, louder than I expected. Everyone turned to look at me. I felt a rush of adrenaline, not from anger, but from clarity. She made it clear who she wanted to protect. "That's it. That's all I have to say." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. I sat there, stunned, my chest tight, but a strange warmth spreading across my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I felt what it was like to be fully backed by my mom, even though she wasn't alive to say it herself. I wandered the house afterward, touching the furniture she had polished for years, feeling the familiar scent of her lingering in the curtains, the rugs, the kitchen. It wasn't just her belongings. It was her love, her approval, something I had always questioned but now felt undeniable. She had protected me. She always had. That night, I sat in the living room, the quiet of the house pressing in, and let it sink in. Greg would call, text, probably try to manipulate his way back into control, but none of that mattered. My mom had made her choice, and she had made it clearly. I poured myself a glass of whiskey from the cabinet she kept for special occasions. I didn't even drink much, but tonight felt like a toast to survival, to vindication, to finally being seen the way she had always seen me. And as I sat there, looking at the framed pictures of her on the walls, I realized something. I wasn't just her son anymore. I was the person she trusted, fully, without question. And that felt like everything. The days after the will reading felt unreal. Greg hadn't spoken to me since that explosive exit. He was never subtle about his resentment, but this time, it was like a storm brewing behind a calm mask. Every family member who visited seemed tense, like they were waiting for the next eruption. I kept telling myself to stay out of it, but the truth is, I wanted him to try something. Just once. I started going through the house, room by room. I'd spent countless hours here as a kid, learning little things about my mom without realizing it. The kitchen had her favorite cast iron pans, still seasoned from years of use. The living room smelled faintly of lavender and cedar, the perfume of a life carefully curated. Even the basement, which I'd avoided for years, held boxes labeled in her precise handwriting. Letters, photographs, journals. It was in that basement that I found something that made me stop in my tracks. A small wooden box, carved with intricate swirls. Inside were letters addressed to me. Mom's handwriting, unmistakable. She'd written them over the years, mostly on birthdays, sometimes when she'd caught me sneaking into the kitchen late at night. The words weren't perfect, they weren't gushy, but they were full of pride, protection, love. She had noticed things I didn't think she cared about. One letter, in particular, hit me harder than I expected. It was dated 2 years ago, tucked between old tax documents and a stack of magazines. I know Greg says you're a disappointment. I know it hurts. But he's wrong. I see you. I see your heart, your choices, even when they don't match what I'd want. You're stronger than you think. Always remember, I'm on your side, even if I can't say it out loud. Protect yourself, but don't close yourself off. I love you. I didn't cry. Not immediately. I just sat there, holding the letter, realizing that every insult Greg had thrown, every sideways comment, every whisper meant nothing. My mom had always had my back. She had protected me in ways he'd never understand. The next weekend, I went back to the diner she loved. The owner, Mrs. Klein, had been a friend of hers for decades. She hugged me before I even ordered coffee. She always talked about you, Mrs. Klein said softly, her eyes glistening. Even when she was mad, she was proud. I nodded, my throat tight. Yeah, I guess. I'm realizing that now. Don't let anyone take that from you, she said. Especially not your uncle. I smiled faintly, grateful. She didn't need to explain. I already knew. Greg, of course, didn't stay quiet forever. I got a call from my cousin 2 days later. He's freaking out, she said, half laughing, half sighing. He's talking about contesting the will, saying it's unfair, that your mom was pressured. You know him. I knew exactly how he worked. Always trying to manipulate, to bend the rules, to make himself the center of attention. But I also knew this time, nothing would stick. My mom had thought of everything. I decided to handle him my way. The day he finally showed up at the house, fuming like he owned the place, I didn't meet him in anger. I let him stew. He paced the living room, muttering about lawyers, inheritance laws, and how could she do this to me? I poured myself a cup of coffee, leaned against the counter, and watched. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Watching him unravel, watching him realize that he had no control over this, that my mom had chosen me, was satisfying in a way I couldn't have imagined. Finally, he snapped, slamming his hand on the counter. You don't deserve this. You're not ready. She's making a mistake. I looked at him, calm but firm. She wasn't making a mistake. She knew exactly what she was doing. And it's her choice, not yours. He glared at me like I'd just punched him, then stormed out again, louder this time, kicking the doorframe. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. I sat down in the living room, the familiar hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock filling the silence. For the first time in my life, I felt fully seen by her, fully protected by her, even in death. Over the next few days, I went through more of her belongings. Some of it was sentimental, some just practical. But every object, every letter, every photograph felt like a message. She trusted me. She believed in me. She had fought for me in ways no one else could understand. And I realized something important. It wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about the validation I had always longed for, finally confirmed by the person whose opinion mattered most. Greg didn't contact me again for weeks. I heard through the grapevine that he was threatening lawsuits, lawyers, the works, but I didn't care. For the first time, I felt untouchable in a way, not because of money, but because my mom's love and protection were mine. Fully. That night, I sat in her recliner, letters spread around me, sipping the whiskey I'd promised myself earlier but never opened. I smiled faintly, thinking about all the things I'd never heard her say out loud, but now understood in a way that didn't hurt anymore. She'd always been on my side. And now, even without her, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I finally allowed myself to cry. Not tears of pain, but of relief, recognition, and gratitude. The kind of tears that hit your chest and make you feel lighter, freer. Greg could storm, yell, and fume all he wanted. He couldn't touch this. He never could. And for the first time, I felt at peace. It had been about a month since the will reading, and the house still smelled like her, lavender, cedar, a faint hint of vanilla from the candles she liked. Every morning I'd wake up, walk into the kitchen, and just look around. It felt surreal, like I'd stepped into a version of my life I'd only dreamed about. My mom's protection was tangible here. Her choices, her things, her planning, they were shields around me. But of course, peace never lasts forever when family is involved. Greg had cooled off a little, mostly keeping his distance, but I knew he was plotting. I could feel it in the looks my cousins threw me at family gatherings, in the whispers that floated just low enough to make me tense. And then, of course, there were the texts, passive-aggressive, thinly veiled threats about what's fair and family honor. He was trying to get me to react, to crack, to give him a reason to push legal nonsense. I didn't. Not once. Instead, I started settling into the life my mom had left behind. I took her old truck for a spin one weekend. It had been a beat-up old thing, but she'd loved it. Driving it around, blasting some music she liked, old Motown, some classic rock, made me feel connected to her. I even caught myself laughing at small things, like how the radio would crackle and sputter if I went over 25 miles per hour, or how the glove compartment still had a pack of chewing gum she'd always carried. Then came the subtle victories, the family heirlooms. I started cataloging them, photographing each piece, making notes about where they had come from, their history. Each item was a story, a memory, a lesson. I wasn't just inheriting things. I was inheriting her life, in pieces and fragments, and I wanted to honor it the way she would have. Greg, of course, didn't take this well. I got a call one evening from my cousin Rachel. "He's here," she said nervously. "He's trying to intimidate you. He said he's coming over." I sighed. I'd been expecting it, honestly. When he showed up, he was pacing, muttering about lawyers and family betrayal. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by that raw, twitchy anger that made him look almost dangerous. "I don't know how you can sit there, acting like this is all fine," he shouted as soon as he stepped inside. I calmly set down the tea I'd poured myself. "It's fine," I said. "Everything's exactly how she wanted. There's nothing for you to take, nothing for you to argue." She made it clear. "You don't understand," he said, voice rising. "This isn't just about stuff. It's about respect. Family." "Family?" I asked, smiling faintly. "She made her choice. She chose me, and I'm the only one honoring her in the way she deserved. You? You're just angry you didn't get your way." For a second, he froze. I could see it. Something in him realizing that no manipulation, no threats, no theatrics were going to work this time. I wasn't reacting out of fear, shame, or even grief. I was reacting out of certainty. My mom had my back, and Greg had nothing. He stormed out again, muttering threats under his breath. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. Sitting there, watching the space he had occupied moments ago, I felt a strange, satisfying calm. My mom had protected me in life, and even in death, her plan was flawless. Over the next week, I found myself more confident than I'd ever been. I started hosting small dinners in the house, inviting friends and neighbors my mom had cared about. It felt right, bringing life back into the space she'd built. I realized that her protection wasn't just about shielding me from Greg. It was about giving me a foundation to thrive, to live, to be proud of my life without her physically present. One afternoon, I was going through some old photo albums when I found a picture of her and Greg from years ago. They were laughing, arms around each other. But there was a note on the back in her handwriting. Don't let him fool you. He only protects what he can control. You, my son, are untouchable to him if you remember who you are. I laughed quietly, a mix of relief and disbelief. That was her, always thinking 3 steps ahead, always looking out for me in ways I didn't always understand. I felt tears well up, but they weren't the sad kind anymore. They were the kind that hit your chest and make you feel full, empowered. She'd left me more than her house, her money, her belongings. She'd left me her foresight, her wisdom, her love. I realized that Greg's anger, his jealousy, his obsession with control, they didn't matter anymore. I was free. And the best part? I had the satisfaction of knowing that the one person who mattered, the person who had truly seen me, had chosen me. Everything else was noise. That night, I walked the grounds of her property, the sun setting over the backyard she had meticulously cared for. The air smelled like grass and earth, familiar and grounding. I imagined her standing there with me, smiling, proud. I could almost hear her whisper, "You've got this. I've got you." And in that moment, I realized something important. Her protection wasn't over. It never would be. It had always been inside me, but now, fully realized, it was unshakable. And for the first time, I felt like myself. Not the kid who had never been enough, not the son my uncle tried to define, but me. Fully, completely, untouchably me. A few weeks later, I was finally starting to feel at home in the house. My mom's things, her furniture, her art. Everything had a place now, and I could feel her in the air, in the floors, in the walls. The house was alive with her presence, and I realized that she had left it to me not just because she wanted to protect me, but because she trusted me to carry on the legacy of her life, her care, her thoughtfulness. Greg, of course, hadn't given up entirely. I knew he'd been calling lawyers, trying to dig up some technicality, some loophole, something to contest the will. But every time I thought about him, I remembered her words, the letters, the notes, the small things she had done over the years to shield me. I felt her presence like a cloak, and suddenly, he was powerless. The first time I saw him after all this was at a family gathering. He arrived late, as always, wearing his carefully constructed facade of control. I didn't greet him, didn't give him a glance. But I could feel his eyes on me, sharp and calculating. He didn't know how much I'd grown since the will reading. He didn't know how much her protection had seeped into me, made me stronger. He tried his usual routine. Thinly veiled insults, reminders of family duty, small jabs meant to provoke. I let him talk. I nodded at the appropriate points, smiled when it was polite, but I didn't react the way he expected. I didn't get defensive, didn't argue. Every time he tried to push, I felt her presence, calm and steady, telling me to hold my ground. And then came the moment I'll never forget. He tried to corner me, leaning close, voice low. "You know this isn't right," he hissed. She would have wanted me. I turned to him, calm, and said no. She wanted me. She trusted me. And I'm honoring her. That's all that matters. For a second, I saw it. The look of disbelief. The realization that he had been outmaneuvered, outthought, and outlasted. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. And I felt this rush of relief, satisfaction, and something I didn't expect, peace. After that, the tension with the rest of the family shifted. People stopped whispering, stopped tiptoeing around me. They saw what had happened, saw my composure, my strength. Some even admitted quietly that they had underestimated me, that my mom had chosen wisely. And for the first time, I didn't care what Greg thought, didn't care about his threats or his attempts to intimidate. His power over me had ended the day my mom decided to protect me fully. I spent that evening walking through the house, touching her things, rearranging a few of the pictures on the walls. Each object reminded me of her meticulous care, her quiet pride. I realized something important. This wasn't just about inheritance or control. It was about the kind of love that's rare and quiet, the kind that doesn't shout or boast but protects fiercely, unconditionally. That night, I sat in her recliner with her old journals spread around me. I read her words again, letters she had written but never sent, musings she had scribbled in the margins of her notebooks. Every sentence was like a whisper from her, guiding me, reminding me that I was enough, that I was loved, that I was her son, and she was always on my side. I thought about Greg one last time, about his anger, his disappointment, his attempts to dominate. And I felt nothing but pity. He had never understood the kind of protection my mom had given me. He had never understood that true power doesn't come from intimidation or control. It comes from trust, love, and foresight. She had given me all three. The next morning, I walked into the backyard, the sun hitting the grass just right, the air crisp and clean. I could see her favorite rose bush blooming in the corner, a reminder of patience, care, and the life she nurtured. I imagined her there with me, arms crossed, smiling, proud. And I finally felt like I belonged, here, in the house, in the family, in the life she had entrusted to me. Greg never came back. I heard through cousins that he moved to another city, still angry, still convinced the world had wronged him. I didn't care. I had what mattered: my mom's love, her protection, and the knowledge that she had seen me for who I truly was. That was worth more than any money, any house, any heirloom. That was worth everything. Sitting in the living room that night, sipping tea, looking at the photographs, I realized that grief had transformed into something else. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was a quiet pride, a steady strength. She had chosen me, and she had done it wisely. Watching my uncle storm out empty-handed was the first time I had ever felt fully, undeniably shielded by her love. Fully, undeniably loved. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a disappointment. I felt like her son. Her protection wasn't just in the letters, the house, or the money. It was in me. And now, finally, it always would be.